In this review we're looking at a particular type of mobile crane, and that's the rough terrain crane. This model is the Linkbelt 100 RT, and as it says on the box, the capacity is 100 US tons. On the back of the box is another picture of the crane and is a description of the features of the model. And if we proceed to turn the box upside down, we can see that the model is made by NZG and has model number 1013. That's quite enough about the box, so let's open it up and see what's inside. Out comes the usual pair of expanded polystyrene trays, and the top is marked for us to help us out. The two trays are taped together so we get the sharp knife out and then we can lift the lid. Here we can see a number of parts with the model protected by soft paper. Included with the model are a couple of sheets, and the first is an illustrated parts list, and that's always helpful so you know what you should have. The second sheet provides some instructions for the main use of the model, and it covers most things but not everything. So for example, it's missing the extension of the boom and any reeving diagrams. The axles in the boom head are of the floating variety, so you need to remove the shipping wire which has been put there to stop the axles dropping out. For the assembly, we'll put the crane in sight mode, and the first thing we'll do is take some rope off of the two winch drums. There's a bit of fiddly masking tape to remove, and then the rope can be run to the end of the boom. Let's fast forward and you can see we've fitted the two hooks, and there's a single line hook and a multi-line block. But the model does lack any tying off point, so here we've used a chain which is just crudely hung off of the handrails. The last part of the assembly is to mount the fly jib, and once you wiggle it about a bit, it securely locks into position for transport. For the detail, we'll start underneath the model, and the steering components are modelled in metal, as are the drive shafts running to each axle. The big tyres are quite impressive and they have a decent tread pattern. Much of the detailed modelling is in metal, including the handrails at the front, and the outrigger beams are also all metal with chevron markings at the top of the posts. The cab is very detailed with an aerial and plastic grab rails, and although the steering wheel looks very high inside the cab, that's because on the real crane the steering column telescopes and tilts. Looking underneath the crane body we can just see the toothed slewing ring, and below that there's a cabinet, a fluid container and also an access ladder. Behind the cab there's some high quality detailing and it's provided by Tiny Graphics. They are sharp and they provide a very good degree of realism. Tiny Graphics also appear on the counterweight block, which is made as a single piece. The high detail continues with more small graphics and also textured surfaces. The rope is decent quality and there are beacon lights, but there are no hydraulic hoses running to the winch motors. On the other side of the model there's another impressive display of very small graphics. The main boom ram is made of tough plastic with a box at the top containing a grub screw. Detailing of the main boom includes work lights, some very sharp graphics, and there's also a small spooling drum. One of the boom sections has pulleys on it, and that's probably to replicate the particular telescoping system. At the boom top there are separate metal sheaves, and they're fairly tightly packed. The outriggers are a little old-fashioned because they have visible screw threads, and the fly jib is an all-metal part. It's got nice link belt signs on it, and the ratchet system for setting an offset angle is modelled, but it's not functional. The two hooks are all metal parts, and they look good on the model. first thing we'll look at is to reduce the model down to a true transport configuration. 2 pins hold the counterweight block in place, and when they're out you can then take the block off, and that reduces the weight of the crane down so that we can then put it on a low loader. Link Belt is an American manufacturer, so we'll load it onto an American truck, and just marvel at how the Cranes etc. operator expertly guides the crane onto the lowboy. Yes, only on Cranes etc. can you see action like this. Next we fold up the loading ramps of the lowboy, and then we can bring around the tractor and hook it up.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Looking at the underside of the crane, and the wheels spin precisely rather than freely, and there is independent steering on each axle, and as you can see the range of movement is very good, and there's just enough stiffness that any pose is held. Out on site and the crane rolls along very precisely, and that's no doubt helped by its relatively heavy weight. If we set the steering, we can get a very sharp turn, and if you like it, you can also have crab steering. One small feature on the crane is the folding handrail up on top, and let's get on and set up ready for some work. The outrigger beams are single stage and they pull out, and then you screw down the pads in the usual way. Fortunately, there's just enough movement in the pistons to hold the model wheels free. Raising the boom is not entirely smooth because of the plastic ram jacket, and there's enough friction in the ram to hold the boom when the boom is not telescoped out. Rotating the crane proved to be a little bit sticky at first, but it became smoother with more use. Here we see the grub screw being tightened by an Allen key, and that works best at set positions where the piston is indented. Each telescopic boom section has one locking point at full extension, and before extending the boom it's best to put some weights on the hooks. And one of the weights you can use is the link belt plate that's included with the model. Telescoping of the boom sections is smooth enough. Once the extension is locked, you unlock it by pushing in on the locking clip, and that then allows you to slide the next telescopic section back down. If you want some more height on the model, you can use the fly jib, and it has a fold out section as you can see. Before we insert the nuts and bolts to lock it, we're cleaning out the holes with a screwdriver, and that sorts out any slight misalignment. The brass nuts and bolts that are used are tiny, and 2 tools are supplied. This one is for the bolt, and you can use it to push the bolt through the holes. And the second tool has a hole where you insert the nut. That then becomes a holder, and it's easy to offer it up to the end of the bolt, and then you just screw them together, but without making them too tight. With the fly jib ready, we can then insert it onto the top of the boom head, and all you have to do is to line up the holes in the fly jib with those in the axle rods. Once you've done that, you secure it with more of the tiny nuts and bolts. Some of the other features of the model include working winches. You use a supplied key to push in on the winch motor, and that disengages the positive brake so you can turn the drum. The model features a tilting cab with a very limited tilt angle, and you have to be careful not to go too far, otherwise the piston springs out of the ram jacket underneath the cab. Another unusual feature on the model is an opening cabinet, and that's nicely implemented, and there's detail to be seen inside. Okay, it's a crane, so it's time to do our usual dim check. And with the boom fully extended, it's about 38 inches or 97 centimetres. And to the top of the fly jib, it's about 56 inches or 142 centimetres. This is a good looking model of the Link Belt 100RT by NZG Models. A particularly nice touch of the detailing are the many tiny graphics, and they give the model a realistic appearance. Most of the functionality also performs very well. Overall, this is an interesting model which is rated as very good.